Watch this.
They are about to become one of the largest supermarket chains in the country. Maybe. While the merger between Albertsons and Kroger is getting worked out, one of those companies is hoping for a payout to their shareholders. Hold on, says Idaho's Attorney General. Campaign signs are out there usually trying to pull people to the polls so they can pull the lever for their candidate. But there's a handful of signs around the valley that are telling people not to vote. Why? Being the center of attention is never easy, but one Idaho town claims to be the center of, well, everything, while also hosting state leaders as capital for a day. Will Albertsons stores soon be Fred Meyer owned? Well, that's the plan, or at least their plan. It's a major merger that is awaiting a final blessing or a block from the federal government. Boise-based Albertsons is ready to roll, it appears. And usually with a merger, companies pay out special dividends to shareholders. And with this one, that could mean up to $4 billion coming back to investors. Just one problem. The regulators remind us the deal between Kroger and Albertsons isn't done yet, and they fear the special dividend will have major impacts in a negative way. The old don't count the chickens before they're hatched kind of thing. Joe Paris explains what that means for Albertsons shareholders.
A group of state attorneys general is asking Albertsons to pump the brakes on sending out billions in special dividend payments to their shareholders. Albertsons announced as a part of their proposed merger with Kroger that, quote, as a part of the transaction, the company will pay a special cash dividend of up to $4 billion to its stockholders. The bipartisan group of attorneys general, including Idaho AG Lawrence Wasden, expressed concerns about the ramifications of such a large dividend, while the merger between Albertsons and Kroger is still pending. In a letter to Albertsons, authored by the District of Columbia Attorney General Karl Racine and signed by AGs from 5 other states, including Idaho, there are concerns about the end result of a merger between the grocery chains. The letter says that the AGs, quote, are dedicated to ensuring that the proposed merger of Kroger and Albertsons, announced on October 14th, does not result in higher prices for consumers, suppressed wages for workers, or other anti-competitive effects. In this period of historically above-average inflation, the letter says, purchasers of groceries have been particularly hard hit. University of Idaho Associate Clinical Professor of Economics, Dr. Stephen Peterson, explains what regulators are possibly looking at in terms of reviewing the merger.
Will it restrict competition, or will it enhance, what is its effect going to be on the consumer? Will it restrict competition? Will it raise prices, or through the supply chain effects and through economies of scale and scope, will it have the opposite effect of ultimately lowering prices?
Peterson says mergers like this can have very different outcomes.
Economic theory tells us that if you reduce the number of sellers, that puts upward pressure on prices, makes it more expensive for consumers. At the same time, mergers like this can create economies of scale, economies of scope, and supply chain efficiencies, which lower overall prices.
The letter to Albertsons highlights that thought, reiterating, quote, federal and state competition laws forbid parties from entering agreements that substantially lessen competition or unreasonably restrain trade. So why is a dividend to investors an issue, according to the attorneys general? Well, as highlighted in the letter, the $4 billion special dividend would account for, quote, approximately 1/3 of Albertsons' market capitalization of approximately $11.19 billion. That amount, according to the letter, would essentially handicap Albertsons from competing against Kroger in the marketplace, something that both companies are supposed to continue doing as the merger is reviewed. And the crux of the letter says, quote, an agreement with Kroger that deprives Albertsons of the cash it needs to operate competitively is economically no different than other pre-merger agreements or actions that have limited the output or other business operations of a merging party, leading the federal agencies to act. Even if Albertsons plans to adhere to the legal requirement in the merger's agreement commitment that it continues to compete with Kroger during the pendency of the merger's review, paying a dividend of that size will hamper its ability to meaningfully compete with Kroger, end quote. Now, Albertsons responded to my request for comment with a statement of their own. It says in part, quote, The special dividend allows us to return cash to all of Albertsons company shareholders. Following the dividend payment, Albertsons companies will continue to be well capitalized with a low debt profile and strong free cash flow. Given our financial strength and positive business outlook, we are confident that we will maintain our strong financial position as we work towards the closing of the merger. End quote. The letter to Albertsons wraps up saying that the approval of the merger is far from assured and, quote, the states must undertake the review and assure themselves that competition in all relevant antitrust markets at issue is preserved. The attorneys general are asking Albertsons to cancel the issuance of that special dividend and postpone any payments of any kind of dividend until the regulatory review is all over, and that they're asking Albertsons to really respond by 5 o'clock tomorrow to tell them if they're going to give the dividend or not. Right now, Brian, it's actually just a request, and Albertsons, we haven't heard from them on if they're going to send this payment or not. But you get the impression that if Albertsons, on their own volition, decides to not stop the payment, at that point, we could see some legal maneuvers. Now, to be very clear, this is just a letter right now from a group of attorneys general. If they don't get their way, it wouldn't be out of the question to see this in court.
So basically, Albertsons is putting the cart before the horse, saying, we're going to pay out this money, so we expect you to guarantee or to approve this sale. And if not, that means we're out a lot of money, and then we might have to declare bankruptcy. Is that how this works?
Yeah, and stuff like this, there's some very specific maneuvering. Of course, we'd have to hear from Albertsons to hear exactly what their plan is, but that is one characterization of what's going on here. Put yourself in a situation where they can't say no.
They can't say no. All right, we'll see what happens. They might say no. All right, thank you, Joe. It's a fixture of fall in the Treasure Valley. Changing colors, changing temperatures, a constant affection for all things pumpkin spiced. And of course, campaign signs sticking up in almost every open space imaginable. But lately, there's a sign that's popped up in several spots that several of you have been asking us about. There it is along Eagle Road, one of the busiest in the state of Idaho on the west side of the highway there. There's another one along State Street near Highway 16, which is also, of course, another of Idaho's busiest thoroughfares. We've heard of another one in a neighborhood in Emmett, by the way, as well. So they're reaching out to some of these other places. We've heard of another one along Federal Way, another highly visible spot, which is why Rosemarie sent us this email this morning. There are Don't Vote QR code signs at Geckler and Federal Way today. Who's behind these signs? Which I'm sure is a question on a lot of people's minds who pass these signs and wonder, who's telling us to not vote? And I can understand your reluctance to just jump on any old QR code without a fear of a virus or something. But we do have a pretty good firewall here at the old Circle 7, so we did, to try and answer Rosemarie's question. It's a simple plywood board, painted white with a QR code. Across the top is written a simple message: don't vote. The QR code leads to don'tvoteidaho.com. One click and you get a similar black block letters on white slideshow. Don't vote if you're not informed. And if you do, it says, you are a lousy citizen. In fact, you are the most dangerous person in a democracy. Then, to get informed, another click and you're whisked away to votebundy.com, the Ammon Bundy for Governor campaign website, where you will be introduced to his highly produced campaign videos, filled with burning flags and constitutions, and those offering to pay for people to move, should he win. But hold on, let's go back to that slideshow. The uninformed voter, they are the most dangerous person in a democracy? Really? Might we suggest some other candidates for that title? How about the misinformed voter, the one who makes their choices based on information from shady sources on social media? Or what about the insurrectionist, the one who tries to overthrow a free and fair election? Might they be more dangerous to a democracy than, say, someone who just doesn't know everything about every candidate on their ballot? Perhaps this is a better order of what is worse for democracy. So even though the link leads to Ammon Bundy's campaign website, we are still not sure if the candidate for governor is behind putting out those signs. We did reach out to his campaign manager several times over the last couple of days to get an answer to that question, but as of right now, we have yet to hear back. We do know Idaho law says, and they have it here, it says any type of general public political advertising, the person responsible for such communication shall be clearly indicated on such communication. And as you saw, there's nothing on those signs that shows who was responsible for them. So we'll wait to see what happens with that. But we do know also it is better to be an informed voter than an uninformed voter. That's true. And we've made it easy for you to be one of those informed voters. Just go to KTVB.com. We have a voter guide there for you. We've got all kinds of information at your disposal. We can even send it to you. All you got to do is text the number 208-321-5614. Vote, and we'll send it directly to you. So please be an informed voter, and please vote. All right, another question sent to us today has to do with what happened during the 2022 legislative session. Seems like so long ago, doesn't it? Back in March, Governor Little signed Senate Bill 1254 into law, and it has to do with no longer requiring emissions testing for your car for certain areas of the Treasure Valley. So Tim wanted to know, knowing Kuna and Caldwell will not have to emission test their cars, can those car owners still, I guess, if people who live in Kuna and Caldwell are able to have their car tested in Boise? That's what he wants to know. The answer to Tim's question comes from the state legislature's website and the Air Quality Board. Yes, emissions testing requirements for Kuna and Canyon County will end at the end of June next year, so June 30th, 2023. But testing for all other areas of Ada County will still be required by federal standards. So how can we have different rules for different parts of a geographical area that are right next to each other? Well, it was addressed when they passed that bill. That bill got rid of the Treasure Valley Air Quality Council. Instead, going forward, the Department of Environmental Quality, or the DEQ, is going to recommend to the state legislature if regions would need to reestablish air quality councils to address local air quality concerns. In 1984, Ada County began the emissions testing program to bring the area back into compliance after violating carbon monoxide standards for air quality, meaning there were just too many pollutants in the air in the Treasure Valley at that time. But get this, Kuna has never been part of that testing. So apparently, we've done a good job since then of containing the air quality. But the plan is for the DEQ to submit a plan to the state to make sure we stay that way, to keep our pollution levels low so that we no longer get our emissions or need to get our emissions tested. So we won't make our air quality worse. That's the plan. So if you live in Ada County and not in Kuna, well, consider yourself lucky for many reasons. But also, plan to continue getting your car tested when you get those cards from the Air Quality Board, even after next June. But here's the thing, Tim, if you live in Canyon County or you live in Kuna and you drive to Boise or any other area of Ada County for work every day, well, apparently those emissions you're kicking out, don't worry, they're just going to stop at the county line.
Outer space. It stretches for millions and millions and millions of miles.
But it all starts at the center. Would you believe the center of the cosmos is in North Idaho? Or is it? Okay, so this is part of the show when we ask you to join the conversation. Send us a text message, 208-321-5614. That's the number. Let us know what you think about the show and what we've talked about so far. You can send those messages complete with your name and the hashtag the 208. That way we know who gets credit when we share yours at the end of the show. Capital for a day, kind of like being line leader for the day back in school. Remember that? Today, the North Idaho town of Wallace is the Gem State's honorary capital for a day. It's a day for the governor and other state leaders to hold office hours, where locals can have a chance to walk in and talk shop and share concerns and issues, that are relevant to the county or the city where they are. Shoshone County, for this fact. Wallace has been called a lot of things over the years. It's also known as the silver capital of the world, since mining has been a backbone of the city since the 1800s. More than $7 billion worth of metals have been mined out of the Coeur d'Alene district since then. But this former focal point for silver mining also holds a claim to an other title that is much bigger than silver capital or even state capital for a day. Wallace claims to be the core of the cosmos, and in 2017 we made the trek to North Idaho to see how the center of the universe came to be.
The canyon town of Wallace sprang up in the 1880s when miners struck silver in the surrounding hills. Since then, more than 1.2 billion ounces of silver have been pulled from the Coeur d'Alene mining district, making Wallace's moniker of silver capital of the world well earned. Mining has slimmed in the Silver Valley since its heyday, but the town has held on through hard times. And that early mining spirit lives on, an independence traced through its complicated connections with the federal government. Despite its seeming seclusion, the feds have found their way to Wallace a number of times. Mining wars in the 1890s brought in the National Guard. In 1910, thousands of soldiers were sent here to fight the largest fire in U.S. history that took out nearly a third of the town. Then, in 1967, the Federal Highway Administration came calling.
Hey, we want to do you a favor. Build this beautiful ribbon of cement, Interstate 90, right smack dab through the middle of your town.
In a word,
Grief, it would have taken out most of Wallace
nope.
to put a freeway right through.
So city officials set out to get every building here on the National Historic Register, and they succeeded, meaning the interstate would have to go around.
They did this downtown core, every building, and then all of a sudden the whole town was listed.
Rick Schaefer calls himself the Prime Minister of Wallace, and if his 6'8" frame didn't stand out enough, he likes to give tours of his town wearing a tux
It's just clean.
Yeah,
and tails.
it is America. It's hometown USA.
Yeah, hometown USA.
Schaefer says it was during the mining downturn of the 80s, the Environmental Protection Agency claimed a century of mining had made Wallace dirty with pollution. The problem was, Schaefer says, they couldn't pinpoint if mining or nature caused the contamination of lead.
EPA cannot prove that naturally forming galena silver ore is a health risk.
But a cleanup crusade began, bringing negative attention to an already ailing city, a 20-year intrusion that irked some residents.
You're stepping on the wrong people.
One night in 2004 would forever put Wallace at the center of a philosophical conversation.
There's 4 people sitting in the Smokehouse Saloon down at the corner of 6th Street and Bank.
The Smokehouse has a history of pouring drinks since the turn of the 20th century.
So, yeah, I think more than one idea has been probably hatched in this room.
The idea hatched that night goes back to the EPA.
The EPA has a rule of probability that says if something cannot not be proven to exist, it could just as well exist.
Which led to then-Mayor Ron Garatone to proclaim,
Ron Garatone, Mayor of Wallace,
Idaho, and all of his subjects
do hereby solemnly declare and proclaim
Wallace to be the center of the universe. Thanks to
the newly discovered science of probabilism. We were further able to pinpoint the exact center within
the center of the universe, to wit, a sewer access cover slightly off center from the intersection of Bank and 6th Street.
Right here.
Right here.
yep, Wallace is the center of the universe because
This is the manhole cover.
You can hear the water underneath.
Oh, yeah, you can.
yet one more reason to make your way to Wallace, even if it's just to pose for pictures at the essence of our existence.
Is it really the center of the universe? But of course.
Brian Holmes,
Prove that it isn't.
Prove that it isn't, exactly.
Idaho's News Channel 7.
Well, if the James Webb Telescope has shown us anything, in a world of endless boundaries, anyone has the right to claim themselves as the center of the universe. And a lot of people have. That claim comes with some competition.
Starting in Seattle, there's a neighborhood to the north known as Fremont, but to the locals, it's known as the center of the universe since 1991. They even have a sign that says so, and many other signs to say how far other destinations are from said center. There's also Tulsa, Oklahoma. There, a tourist attraction featuring an acoustic anomaly claims to be the center of the universe, because apparently standing in that circular spot in the middle of a pedestrian bridge built in the 80s, and you're standing in your own private echo chamber. A noise made here bounces back louder than it left your mouth. Oh, and let's not leave out Ashland, Virginia.
Ashland.
Yeah, that's what I said. More than 170 years old. It's a town full of history with a strong connection to trains. Their mayor, back in the 80s, claimed center of the universe status because of Ashland's closeness to Virginia's capital, the nation's capital, the mountains, and the beach.
Let's hope your journey takes you through the center of the universe in Ashland, Virginia.
Okay. Even though they were a bit late to the party, Wallace's claim is still centered on a better story.
All right, in just about 4 days, the main drag of Boise's North End will be kind of a drag show. Kids in costumes pretending to be something other than their everyday selves. We know it as Halloween. But before they dress up, the houses on Harrison Boulevard have already been dressed up. Pumpkins, lights, and skeletons in place to spook the skittish. Our final minute of the show, let's get to your text messages you sent in, like this one. Thank you for the piece on the QR codes stating to not vote. Facebook, YouTube, political ads playing during your show, all spinning and churning up untruths and, well, and then some. Do the work. Be an informed voter. Read. Ask questions of those running and vote. I'm Blair Neagle, and I approve this message. Meanwhile, the opposite side of that, nice partial take on the uninformed voter story, saying it's an insurrectionist and said, I don't support Bundy, but I agree the uninformed voter is scary. They'll just vote for whatever or whomever without knowing the ramifications. Way to push your agenda. So you're saying an insurrectionist is not as dangerous or more dangerous than somebody who just votes because they don't know things? Somebody who tries to overturn an election is not dangerous. Okay. The majority of uninformed voters in Idaho historically only needs to recognize one letter on their ballot. They'll vote for any candidate with an R next to the name over 60% of the time. Truth speaks. We'll see you tomorrow.